Hello everyone, and welcome to this long, slow dive into the life of a medieval Roman citizen, a world so distant and different from our own, yet fascinating in ways you might never have imagined. I want to start by asking something simple. Where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? It's always interesting to know who's sharing this quiet journey with me. Imagine, just for a moment, the bustling streets of Rome centuries ago. A city teeming with life, yet utterly alien to us in its sounds, smells, and rhythms. As we wander through this story together, picture yourself stepping barefoot on cobblestones worn smooth by countless travelers, feeling the dust and heat under your sandals, and listening to the merchants shouting their wares, the clang of blacksmiths in small workshops, and the distant roar of chariots on stone avenues. Life in Rome was complex, structured, and full of contradictions. Enormous wealth and glaring poverty, intricate politics and everyday survival, divine rituals alongside superstitions that guided every small choice. You might think of Rome as just grand temples and toga-clad senators, but the true heartbeat of the city lived in ordinary citizens like you, laboring, trading, feasting, and worrying. A typical Roman citizen might awaken before dawn, though not all of them had beds or warm coverings, and the air in their crowded insulae, the apartment blocks that housed most of the population, would be thick with the scent of cooking fires, animals, and sometimes less pleasant human activity. Breakfast was usually simple, often just bread soaked in wine or water, sometimes with olives, cheese, or fruit if one could afford it, eaten quickly before heading out into the noise and motion of the streets. Markets were vibrant, chaotic places where people bargained loudly, sometimes aggressively, over fresh vegetables, salted fish, or small cuts of meat, and where the air was filled with the mingling of smells: roasted grains, fresh herbs, wet leather, and the occasional whiff of decay that could not always be avoided. Roman streets were not particularly clean, and citizens had to navigate puddles, waste, and animals as they hurried to their jobs or errands, all while keeping an eye on the shifting alliances of neighborhood gangs or political factions that sometimes erupted into violence without warning. Work for a Roman citizen depended greatly on one's social standing. Artisans, craftsmen, and laborers labored in cramped workshops or in open yards, hammering, carving, or shaping raw materials into objects both useful and decorative. Their days were long, often from dawn until dusk, and they were punctuated by small breaks for water or a snack of bread, cheese, or a piece of fruit, and sometimes by quick conversations with neighbors about rumors, politics, or family matters. For wealthier citizens, life looked different. They might oversee their estates, write letters, or participate in civic duties, but even they relied on the labor of slaves, freedmen, and servants to maintain a comfortable existence. Food, while central to life, was also a social tool. Dinner parties could be elaborate displays of status, with multiple courses, exotic spices, and performances of music, poetry, or theatrical readings, while the poorer population often ate simply, repetitively, and without luxury. Romans valued entertainment deeply, not just as diversion, but as a cultural glue that reinforced civic identity and social hierarchy. Public baths were not just places to bathe. They were social arenas, fitness centers, and spaces for conversation, gossip, and networking. Citizens would spend hours moving from hot rooms to cold plunges, enjoying massages or exercising with rudimentary equipment, all the while observing or being observed, participating in a subtle dance of social signaling that shaped friendships, marriages, and alliances. Amphitheaters and circuses offered grand spectacles, sometimes violent, sometimes theatrical, but always crowding the senses with spectacle and sound. Gladiatorial combat, chariot races, and elaborate games designed to display the power of the state and the generosity of its leaders, drawing spectators from all walks of life to cheer, fear, or marvel at feats of skill, endurance, and sometimes sheer survival. Religion permeated every action and decision, from simple daily routines to grand public festivals. Romans paid homage to household gods and city deities, offering small sacrifices, incense, or prayers to ensure health, fortune, and protection. Temples rose as imposing monuments, and priests or augurs interpreted omens and the will of the gods, guiding citizens in choices as mundane as the timing of a market visit or as significant as declaring war. superstitions intertwined with practical life. A sudden illness could signal divine displeasure, a lucky omen could be seized as an opportunity, and citizens learned to navigate a world where mortal actions and divine judgment were believed to be inseparably entwined. And so, the life of a medieval Roman citizen, while filled with toil and routine, was equally rich with texture, sound, and sensation. Streets thrummed with constant movement, homes and workshops echoed with labor and conversation. Markets overflowed with goods and gossip, and temples and public spaces offered guidance, spectacle, and awe. Every small choice, what to eat, when to wake, how to interact, carried subtle consequences, shaping social standing, safety, and even fate. This world, distant though it may seem, was vibrant, messy, and alive in ways both ordinary and extraordinary as the morning sun climbed higher over the rooftops and aqueducts of Rome. The city's energy only grew more insistent, weaving together the lives of countless citizens in patterns both predictable and surprising. Children, often barefoot, dashed through narrow alleys, chasing stray animals or improvising games with sticks and stones, while their elders carried out tasks that ensured survival and comfort, from fetching water at public fountains to hauling goods from distant markets. Their arms strong from daily exertion and their minds attuned to the delicate dance of social observation. Street vendors called out in repetitive chants, their voices rising above the rumble of carts and the clatter of hooves on cobblestone, selling everything from bread baked in communal ovens to honey-sweetened pastries and dried fruits imported from distant provinces. Each item carrying with it a story of travel, labor, and exchange that most citizens only sensed in passing. Meal times were a ritual in themselves, even for those without wealth, shaping the rhythm of a day with quiet expectation. The simplest breakfasts, sometimes bread softened in wine or water, provided sustenance, while the midday meal, often the largest for laborers, offered opportunity for communal engagement, storytelling, or quiet observation. Families gathered around wooden tables, sharing morsels of boiled legumes, vegetables, salted fish, or the occasional chunk of meat, depending on availability and season. Flavors were enhanced with olive oil, herbs, and the occasional imported spice, turning even modest ingredients into subtle statements of taste and aspiration. In homes with limited space, the aroma of cooking mingled with that of animals kept in small courtyards, chickens, goats, and the occasional pig, blurring the line between domestic life and the persistent demands of survival. Craftsmen continued their meticulous work, hammering metals, shaping clay, or weaving fabrics that would eventually clothe not just the wealthy, but citizens across the social spectrum. Blacksmiths' forges glowed like molten suns in shadowed alleys, sending sparks into the air and into the hearts of young apprentices who watched, fascinated, as raw iron transformed into useful tools or ornaments, each strike echoing both utility and artistry. Weavers' looms clattered rhythmically, producing garments of wool or linen, sometimes dyed with expensive pigments to convey status, and sometimes plain, functional, but no less essential. Meanwhile, potters shaped clay into vessels for cooking, storage, and ritual, their hands coated in earth, their movements honed by repetition over months and years. Every object, no matter how simple, carried the imprint of skill and labor, a testament to the interconnected economy of the city. Entertainment and socialization remained central to Roman life. Public baths, always bustling, functioned as arenas for both physical and social engagement. Citizens soaked in warm waters, conversed in low murmurs, and observed each other with subtle scrutiny, measuring social standing, alliances, and potential opportunities. Gymnasiums attached to bath complexes offered instruction in exercise, wrestling, and martial discipline, not merely for health, but as preparation for civic duties or personal defense. Music, poetry, and storytelling filled private homes as well, with the wealthy inviting performers to recite epic tales, recounting history or myth, while audiences responded with polite laughter, sighs, or silent attention, each gesture carefully calibrated to convey education, refinement, or social insight. Religion continued to permeate every aspect of life, sometimes in ways so subtle they became invisible. Daily offerings of food or incense to household gods were performed almost mechanically, Yet the act carried weight, as failing to observe proper rituals could invite misfortune or social censure. Festivals punctuated the year with dramatic displays, processions, and games, often involving months of preparation. Citizens participated in sacrifices, dramatic reenactments, and elaborate feasts, blurring the boundaries between sacred observance and communal entertainment. Temples, with their intricate carvings and soaring columns, served as landmarks, centers of influence, and reminders of a world where divine favor could shape the fortunes of individuals and the city alike. Even leisure for ordinary citizens required ingenuity. In cramped neighborhoods, families or small groups devised games with sticks, stones, or rudimentary balls, sometimes imitating the spectacles of gladiators or chariot races they had witnessed. Storytelling, passed orally from neighbor to neighbor, filled the air with drama, moral lessons, or humor, providing both education and distraction from the challenges of daily life. Music and simple instruments accompanied dances during celebrations, weddings, or religious occasions, binding communities together in rhythm and shared experience. The line between work and play was fluid, as necessity often dictated creativity, transforming mundane tasks into subtle contests of skill, patience, or endurance. Food, labor, entertainment, and ritual intertwined into a delicate web that structured every hour of life. Citizens navigated markets, streets, workshops, and public spaces with awareness of not just their own needs, but the invisible forces of hierarchy, superstition, and social expectation. Every gesture, every decision, carried consequences, whether immediate, like the price of a loaf of bread, or enduring, like the favor of a neighbor, patron, or deity. Even in their simplest actions, fetching water, kneading dough, repairing a garment, Romans performed a dance between necessity and aspiration, survival and expression, revealing a society both complex and remarkably human in its contradictions and continuity. As the afternoon stretched lazily over Rome, the city transformed yet again, shifting from the bustle of morning trade to the slower, more reflective pace of midday. Citizens retreated to shaded courtyards or narrow alleyways to escape the relentless heat of the sun. Fans in hand, sandals kicked off, and the scent of bread and roasting legumes still lingering in the air. In wealthier homes, frescoes glowed softly in the diffused light, depicting scenes of mythology, landscapes, or daily life, each carefully painted stroke reinforcing status, taste, and sophistication. While in the crowded insulae, plaster walls bore the faint marks of smoke, soot, and the fingerprints of countless hands. Within every dwelling, no matter the size or comfort, there was a rhythm to life, a pattern of tasks, rest, and observation, dictated by the unspoken rules of community, family, and survival. Children continued their endless play, imitating the world of adults with exaggerated gestures, mock arguments, and imagined ceremonies. They were teachers in miniature, passing down knowledge through imitation, laughter, and trial, learning the complex rituals of social interaction long before they assumed adult responsibilities. Parents observed with careful attention, intervening only when necessary, imparting lessons about caution, respect, or preparation for life in a world that demanded both intelligence and endurance. For many children, the smells of cooking and the sound of distant hammers and voices were a constant backdrop, a form of education by immersion, shaping their understanding of what life required and what rewards it offered. Roman citizens' meals were as much about survival as about social cohesion. Those with limited means often ate simple stews of lentils, cabbage, and beans, seasoned lightly with herbs, salt, and sometimes oil, accompanied by bread torn roughly by hand. Wine, diluted with water, served as hydration and comfort, a staple present across social classes, though its quality varied greatly. Meat, though prized, was largely a luxury for the majority, preserved through salting or smoking to last through the weeks between purchases. The act of eating was communal, and even the smallest meals became opportunities for conversation, advice, or subtle competition. Who could prepare the most satisfying bread, the richest stew, the cleverest trade at the market? Evening in Rome brought both relief and tension. As merchants closed their stalls and laborers returned home, the streets transformed once more, the sounds changing from energetic shouting to quieter murmurs, the clang of tools replaced by the shuffle of footsteps. Public fountains remained hubs of conversation, gossip, and negotiation, their flowing water providing both utility and comfort in the fading light. Citizens paused, shared news, exchanged small favors, and quietly assessed the safety of returning home. Some sought the public baths again, savoring a slower rhythm of relaxation, massages, and companionship, while others lingered in small taverns or courtyards, sampling wine, olives, or simple dishes, enjoying stories recited aloud by traveling performers or neighbors. Entertainment, though varied, remained essential. Gladiatorial games, though infrequent for the average citizen, were remembered in conversation, discussed in minute detail, and sometimes mimicked in children's play or storytelling. Musicians wandered through neighborhoods, playing flutes, lyres, and percussion, their melodies both celebratory and melancholic, reflecting the layered emotions of daily existence. Festivals punctuated life with grandeur. Processions in honor of gods, communal feasts, theatrical performances, and dramatic rituals all required months of preparation, drawing the entire city into a shared experience that blurred class boundaries, even if only temporarily. Participation was not merely recreational. It was a form of civic duty, a statement of allegiance, piety, and belonging. Religion remained woven into every aspect of daily life, subtle yet unyielding. Citizens offered prayers, small sacrifices, and daily homage to household gods, believing that favor, or neglect, could sway fortune, health, and prosperity. Temples, statues, and altars were focal points of both public and private life, signaling status, devotion, and understanding of tradition. Even mundane decisions, from choosing a market stall to selecting a travel route, were sometimes guided by omens, birdsong, or the advice of augurs, individuals trained to interpret signs and convey divine intentions. In this way, life in Rome was simultaneously ordinary and profoundly connected to forces beyond human comprehension. Labor, whether in workshops, homes, or public spaces, remained constant. Yet the city's rhythm allowed for moments of reflection, creativity, and subtle competition. Artisans, bakers, and merchants measured themselves against peers, striving to improve skill, efficiency, or reputation. The quality of a potter's vessel, the durability of a blacksmith's tool, or the cleverness of a merchant's trade could alter daily life, earning respect, attention, and advantage in a society where small improvements had tangible rewards. Observing these details, participating in commerce, and negotiating social standing required both attentiveness and adaptability, qualities essential for survival in a city dense with human activity, ambition, and unpredictability. Thus, the life of a Roman citizen was a continuous interplay of labor, leisure, ritual, and social negotiation. Every day offered opportunities and challenges, each meal, bath, festival, or interaction adding texture to a world both familiar and alien to us today. The complexity of this existence, rich with sensory experiences, social expectations, and spiritual obligations, provides an intricate portrait of life in one of history's most enduring civilizations, revealing that even centuries later, there is much to learn, imagine, and reflect upon from the ordinary moments of the past. As twilight settled over the city, Rome transformed yet again, the fading sunlight casting long shadows between the tall, uneven buildings, softening the sharp edges of cobblestones and revealing the texture of centuries in every wall, every stair, every worn doorway. The air carried a mingling of scents: smoke from evening fires, faintly charred bread, herbs drying on windowsills, and the less pleasant odors of streets that were seldom entirely clean, reminders of the constant tension between human habitation and nature's intrusion. Citizens moved with purpose and caution. Even as darkness approached, the city did not sleep, and the rhythm of daily life persisted in quieter, more intimate forms. Inside homes, families prepared for the evening, tending to children, mending garments, or finishing small tasks that had been deferred during the busier daylight hours. Candles or oil lamps flickered, casting dancing light upon walls, while parents told stories to teach lessons, entertain, or calm restless young minds. These moments were layered with meaning. A simple tale of a heroic figure could inspire courage, a moral fable could instill patience, and a humorous anecdote could bond family members together, creating shared memory and identity. Education in the home was practical as much as cultural. Children learned counting, reading simple scripts, or basic skills required for survival, all interwoven with the cadence of daily routine. Evening markets provided another layer of city life, quieter than the chaos of the morning but no less vital. Vendors selling wine, dried fruits, cheese, or small household items called out softly to potential customers, negotiating prices with gestures, smiles, and careful words. Citizens lingered, discussing news, political rumors, or personal matters while sampling food, exchanging advice, or scouting opportunities for trade or barter. For many, these interactions were crucial, not only for practical survival but also for maintaining social bonds and awareness of shifting dynamics within the neighborhood, an informal system of checks, balances, and alliances. Craftsmen continued their work into the evening, sometimes by the dim glow of lamps, hammering, shaping, and weaving with practiced skill. Apprentices learned not only techniques but patience, attention to detail, and the social subtleties of their craft, observing the ways their masters negotiated, complimented, or subtly corrected behavior. Every object produced, be it a simple clay pot, a metal tool, or a woven garment, embodied knowledge, labor, and pride, linking the laborer with the broader community, the marketplace, and the city's intricate economy. The distinction between ordinary and extraordinary often lay in precision, subtle embellishments, or the mastery of small, almost invisible details, qualities recognized by both peers and clients. Leisure remained essential, even for those constrained by modest means. Citizens gathered in courtyards, on porches, or near fountains to share conversation, music, and laughter. Games, though simple, were competitive, sharpening dexterity and wit, whether tossing stones, spinning tops, or improvising dice games. Music and singing accompanied both work and leisure, instruments played by itinerant musicians or family members alike, echoing through alleys and courtyards, creating a soundtrack of rhythm, repetition, and occasional improvisation that united the city in subtle, invisible ways. Festivals, even when distant, shaped anticipation. Preparation involved food, costume, rehearsal, and conversation, fostering a sense of participation and belonging across social strata. Religion, ever present, influenced evening routines as well. Prayers to household deities, offerings of food, or quiet gestures of reverence reminded citizens of their place in a cosmos believed to be alive with divine intention. Choices about travel, trade, and social interaction were often influenced by auguries, dreams, or the advice of priests, creating a delicate balance between human agency and perceived divine will. This pervasive spirituality shaped ethics, social norms, and daily decisions, embedding an unspoken order into life's apparent chaos. Night deepened, and the city's pace slowed, but it did not cease. Citizens returned to their homes, sharing meals, stories, and laughter, yet remaining alert to potential dangers. Thieves, accidents, or the unpredictability of neighbors. The architecture itself, narrow staircases, high windows, and shared courtyards, facilitated observation, communication, and sometimes subtle surveillance, ensuring that even in privacy, one was connected to the broader social network. Sleep, when it came, was often brief and interrupted, a necessity squeezed between labor, vigilance, and ritual, yet it provided essential recovery for the body and mind, allowing the cycle to begin anew with the morning sun. The life of a medieval Roman citizen was a continuous weave of work, leisure, ritual, and social navigation, where every choice, from meal preparation to conversation, from crafting to worship, had significance, either immediate or lasting. This complex interconnection of labor, creativity, community, and belief created a city that was alive in countless, interdependent ways, a dynamic organism shaped by the hands, voices, and intentions of its inhabitants. Even centuries later, imagining this world reveals not only its challenges, but also the subtle, persistent beauty of human life lived in rhythm with necessity, aspiration, and the enduring pulse of a civilization that continues to fascinate and instruct. As night deepened and the city's lamplight flickered across walls and streets, the rhythm of Rome continued in subtler ways, a quiet undercurrent beneath the apparent stillness. Citizens, though resting, remained attuned to sounds of movement, the occasional distant shout, or the rustle of animals in alleyways, and the city itself seemed alive with hidden activity. Some ventured into the darker corners of neighborhoods, gathering in small taverns or courtyards to trade news, discuss politics, or simply escape the monotony of routine, while others quietly engaged in tasks deferred from the day. Repairing tools, preparing food for the next morning, or writing brief notes and reminders for family members or business associates. Every action, no matter how small, contributed to a dense web of interaction, responsibility, and observation, where survival and social positioning intertwined. The preparation for festivals, religious rituals, and civic ceremonies was an ongoing thread in daily life, even when no grand event was imminent. Citizens practiced songs, rehearsed dances, and prepared offerings, often months in advance, creating anticipation, excitement, and social cohesion. Festivals were marked by music, theatrical performances, and competitive games, attended by citizens of all social strata, each participating according to their status, wealth, and opportunity. Children were introduced to these traditions early, observing adults, imitating gestures, and learning the subtleties of ritual and celebration, forming memories and expectations that would guide them through adulthood. The anticipation of such events added texture to daily life, creating cycles of labor and reward, monotony and spectacle. Markets, though quieter in the evening, maintained their importance as hubs of social and economic exchange. Citizens bartered goods, shared advice, and monitored neighborhood dynamics, subtly negotiating alliances, debts, or favors. Merchants displayed wares with care, arranging fruits, herbs, pottery, and textiles to catch attention, while shoppers assessed quality, price, and reputation with practiced judgment. These interactions were not only functional but social, reinforcing trust, hierarchy, and reputation in ways that formal institutions could not. Even small gestures, a nod, a smile, a warning, could alter perception, favor, or opportunity, revealing a complex network of relationships that permeated daily life. Education, both formal and informal, played a central role in shaping citizens. Wealthier families could afford tutors to instruct children in reading, writing, arithmetic, rhetoric, and philosophy, while most relied on practical learning through observation, imitation, and participation. Children absorbed lessons about social hierarchy, trade skills, domestic management, and religious practice almost unconsciously, their curiosity guided by necessity and example. Storytelling remained a critical tool for instruction. Epic tales, fables, and local anecdotes provided moral guidance, strategic thinking, and social awareness, while embedding cultural knowledge that would persist across generations. Labor continued in its manifold forms, interwoven with leisure, ritual, and education. Artisans refined skills in workshops, learning not only craft but also negotiation, presentation, and reputation management. Bakers measured ingredients with precision, understanding that texture, taste, and aroma influenced social standing and income. Blacksmiths transformed raw iron into functional and ornamental objects, their expertise recognized by peers and clients alike, while weavers, potters, and other craftsmen contributed to the visual and functional fabric of the city. Even minor innovations, slightly improved tools, clever designs, or subtle stylistic touches were significant, affecting both practical outcomes and social perception. Entertainment remained an essential relief from labor and routine, a space where social hierarchies could be observed, tested, or subtly contested. Music, song, and dance accompanied meals, festivals, and private gatherings, shaping emotions and reinforcing community bonds. Citizens engaged in games, sometimes athletic, sometimes strategic, sometimes imaginative, challenging skill, luck, and wit. Stories recited by neighbors, performers, or family members intertwined education, amusement, and subtle commentary on politics, morality, and human behavior, creating a tapestry of cultural continuity that informed every citizen's understanding of their place in the world. Religion continued to shape both public and private life in visible and invisible ways. Offerings to household gods, prayers, and minor rituals were performed with care, reflecting belief, social expectation, and hope for favor. Citizens interpreted omens, consulted priests, or observed rituals, believing that divine approval or disapproval could influence fortune, health, and opportunity. The line between sacred and mundane was fluid, each action potentially imbued with moral, social, or spiritual significance, weaving a subtle layer of order and guidance into the unpredictable flux of daily existence. Thus, life in Rome, even in the seemingly quiet hours of evening, was a dense tapestry of labor, learning, ritual, leisure, and social navigation. Every citizen, from child to elder, contributed to, observed, and participated in the complex interplay of human activity, community expectation, and divine oversight. Each moment, each task, each gesture was connected to countless others, forming patterns that were invisible in isolation but revealed themselves as the rhythms of life in a city both extraordinary and enduring. As the night deepened and the city settled into a more hushed rhythm, subtle activity persisted behind closed doors and in dimly lit courtyards, a testament to the unceasing pulse of Roman life. Citizens moved quietly, performing chores, repairing tools, tending animals, or preparing for the next day, their movements precise and efficient, honed by repetition and necessity. Within families, routines intertwined with instruction. Parents guided children through basic skills, shared stories that encoded morality and strategy, and subtly observed behavior to reinforce social norms, forming a delicate balance between authority, care, and the cultivation of independence. These domestic rhythms, though often overlooked, were the foundation of social stability, shaping generations without the overt spectacle of public life. Crafts and trades occupied a central role in the city's economy and culture. Blacksmiths worked in open-forge workshops, their strikes sending sparks into the air, forging tools, weapons, and domestic implements that were essential to everyday survival. Apprentices learned not only technical skill but also the subtle social dance of commerce. How to present wares, negotiate with clients, and maintain reputation within a tightly knit community of craftsmen. Weavers, spinning thread from wool or flax, transformed raw fibers into textiles for clothing, curtains, or ceremonial garments, their work requiring precision, patience, and attention to both function and aesthetic. Potters shaped clay into vessels, often inscribing or painting designs that carried meaning, identity, or simply beauty, transforming humble materials into objects that connected the domestic, social, and ritual worlds. Neighborhoods were microcosms of social observation and interaction. Citizens navigated shared courtyards, stairways, and streets with constant awareness, greeting neighbors, exchanging small favors, or monitoring potential conflicts. Alliances, grudges, and reputations developed subtly over time, with gestures, words, and actions carefully calibrated to maintain harmony or advantage. Children absorbed these dynamics through observation and participation, learning early the delicate rules that govern social acceptance, respect, and influence. Every exchange, whether a smile, a warning, or a critique, contributed to a complex web of community life, teaching lessons that formal instruction could not replicate. Evening leisure provided moments of connection and relief. Citizens gathered to play games, sing, or share stories, blending amusement with education and subtle moral guidance. Music, performed on simple instruments like flutes, lyres, or small percussion, accompanied conversation and movement, shaping rhythm, mood, and interaction. Storytelling served multiple purposes: entertaining listeners, preserving memory, instructing in social and moral principles, and occasionally providing commentary on politics or human behavior. These activities, though often unremarkable in isolation, formed the heartbeat of community life, linking individuals through shared experience, emotion, and memory. Religion continued to guide private and public actions with quiet authority. Household rituals, offerings to Laras and Penates, and consultations with augurs or priests reflected a worldview in which divine influence touched nearly every decision. Citizens interpreted omens in the flight of birds, the pattern of smoke, or unexpected events, integrating these signs into daily choices. Participation in public festivals, sacrifices, or ceremonial games reinforced social cohesion, connecting the mundane routines of life to a broader cosmic and civic order. Belief, ritual, and observance were inseparable from work, leisure, and social interaction, forming a framework within which life's uncertainties could be managed and meaning assigned. Food, simple or elaborate, remained central to daily existence and social expression. Families prepared meals with available ingredients, legumes, bread, cheese, vegetables, and the occasional meat, seasoned with herbs, olive oil, or imported spices. Cooking was both sustenance and subtle communication of skill, care, and social awareness. Meals were shared in small gatherings, offering opportunities for conversation, instruction, and observation. Even in modest households, presentation, timing, and proportion conveyed attention to detail and social expectation, while the act of eating itself reinforced community and familial bonds. The city's architecture and infrastructure shaped every moment of life, from narrow stairways in Insuli to wide avenues lined with columns, arches, and public fountains. Aqueducts carried water into homes and public baths, facilitating hygiene, leisure, and social interaction, while marketplaces, courtyards, and streets provided arenas for commerce, conversation, and observation. Each physical element contributed to both survival and culture, embedding citizens within a network of shared resources, responsibilities, and expectations that structured behavior and interaction. Thus, the life of a medieval Roman citizen was a continuous interplay of labor, learning, leisure, ritual, and social awareness. Every gesture, every conversation, every meal, and every crafted object carried significance, shaping survival, reputation, and meaning. Even in the quiet of evening, beneath the flicker of lamps and the distant murmur of the city, Rome remained alive in countless interconnected ways, a city whose complexity and rhythm revealed both the challenges and subtle pleasures of ordinary life, a world both foreign and strangely familiar across the centuries. As the days in Rome progressed, citizens anticipated festivals and civic celebrations with a mixture of excitement, preparation, and subtle anxiety, knowing that participation required careful attention to social norms, religious observances, and personal reputation. These events, though intermittent, structured the rhythm of life in profound ways. Weeks or months in advance, families and neighborhoods prepared costumes, food, and decorations, rehearsed songs and dances, and coordinated with neighbors to ensure that their contributions reflected favorably on their household. The preparation itself became a social exercise, reinforcing alliances, establishing hierarchies, and demonstrating competence, patience, and taste. Markets and workshops continued to function even during these periods of preparation, though with heightened awareness of shifting social expectations. Merchants displayed exotic goods, spices, fabrics, pottery, intended not only for daily use but also for ceremonial purposes, drawing attention from wealthier citizens who sought to demonstrate status or piety. Craftsmen were called upon to produce decorative items, functional implements for festival games, or specialized garments, each object bearing the imprint of skill, timing, and aesthetic judgment. Apprentices learned the subtle cues of timing and presentation, understanding that technical mastery alone was insufficient. Social perception and anticipation of demand were equally critical. Children participated with enthusiasm and curiosity, absorbing lessons in observation, imitation, and social negotiation. They rehearsed dances, played improvised games that mimicked adult spectacles, and learned the intricacies of ceremonial behavior. Storytelling and song provided further instruction, blending entertainment with moral guidance, historical knowledge, and subtle critiques of civic life. The city itself became a classroom, where every corner, sound, and interaction carried educational value, shaping young citizens' understanding of hierarchy, obligation, and community identity. Even ordinary streets and homes were transformed by the anticipation of celebration. Decorations, garlands, painted signs, and temporary sculptures appeared in courtyards, workshops, and market stalls, altering the visual and emotional landscape. Citizens adjusted behavior, speaking with greater attention, observing dress codes, and offering gestures of courtesy or deference that reinforced social norms. These moments, seemingly minor, carried tangible consequences, influencing reputation, alliances, and access to resources. Participation in festivals was thus both an opportunity and a test, revealing competence, creativity, and adherence to tradition. Entertainment during festivals was elaborate and varied. Musical performances, theatrical recitations, athletic contests, and ritual ceremonies captivated participants and spectators alike. Gladiatorial games and mock battles, though sometimes violent, were celebrated as demonstrations of skill, courage, and endurance, drawing attention from diverse social strata. Citizens observed carefully, learning through imitation, critique, and reflection, internalizing lessons about strategy, morality, and public perception. Even in moments of spectacle, subtle hierarchies were evident. Seating arrangements, gestures of respect, and distribution of rewards signaled status, power, and influence. Food and drink were central to both private and public celebrations. Elaborate feasts featured multiple courses, exotic ingredients, and carefully orchestrated presentation, reinforcing social hierarchy and personal competence. Families prepared dishes with attention to taste, appearance, and ritual significance, understanding that culinary skill conveyed both status and intention. Even simple meals for lower status citizens carried communal and symbolic meaning, reinforcing bonds, teaching patience, and providing a sense of participation in the larger civic fabric. Wine, often diluted for daily consumption, took on ceremonial importance during festivals, shared in ritual toasts or offerings, connecting mundane pleasure with spiritual and social observance. Religion remained interwoven with every aspect of festivity. Sacrifices, prayers, and ritual gestures punctuated celebrations, signaling devotion, gratitude, and hope for favor. Priests, augurs, and other religious officials guided actions, interpreted omens, and communicated subtle expectations, shaping behavior and social perception. Citizens understood that participation was not merely optional but embedded in civic identity. Adherence, performance, and attention to detail influenced reputation, opportunity, and personal fortune. Even casual missteps could carry consequences, underscoring the delicate balance between celebration, propriety, and social navigation. In this complex interplay of labor, leisure, ritual, and social observation, the ordinary life of a Roman citizen unfolded with richness and subtlety. Each day, each meal, each interaction contributed to a dense network of relationships, obligations, and opportunities. Every gesture, whether preparing a dish, repairing a tool, performing in a festival, or quietly observing neighbors, reinforced social patterns, cultural continuity, and civic identity. The city, with its bustling streets, echoing workshops, sacred temples, and lively courtyards, became both stage and teacher, shaping the rhythms, ambitions, and sensibilities of its inhabitants in ways both overt and invisible. As the moon rose over Rome, casting silver light across terracotta rooftops and narrow alleys, the city revealed layers of activity that many daytime observers would never notice. In quieter streets, craftsmen worked late into the night, guided by flickering lamps and the faint glow of coals. A potter shaped clay with deliberate patience, spinning the wheel in rhythmic motion, each vessel forming under hands that had memorized centuries of technique. Nearby, a metalworker adjusted the heat of his forge, hammering small pieces of bronze into intricate fittings for doors or jewelry, his apprentice carefully observing every strike, noting how pressure, angle, and timing transformed raw material into something both functional and beautiful. These nocturnal hours were a time of concentration and skill, when labor blended seamlessly with creativity, and when even ordinary objects became reflections of care, pride, and human ingenuity. Merchants who had closed their stalls during the day sometimes returned to examine their goods, prepare for early morning trade, or record accounts in simple ledgers. scratching numbers onto wax tablets with practiced efficiency. Each trade was more than an exchange of goods. It was a negotiation of reputation, an exercise in social intelligence, and a subtle display of knowledge about supply, demand, and the ebb and flow of city life. A loaf of bread, a vial of oil, or a small clay figurine carried stories of labor, transportation, and commerce, connecting the seller, the buyer, and countless unseen hands in a chain that stretched across neighborhoods, rivers, and provinces. In residential quarters, families gathered in dimly lit rooms, telling stories that had passed through generations, blending history, legend, and moral guidance. Children leaned forward with wide eyes as parents recounted tales of gods, heroes, or cunning merchants, embedding lessons in curiosity, courage, and careful observation. Even small anecdotes carried layered meaning. A description of clever navigation through a market might teach attention to opportunity, while a story of misjudged trust could instruct prudence and patience. Meals, though simple bread, cheese, olives, or boiled vegetables, were accompanied by conversation, laughter, and careful observation of social cues, teaching etiquette, negotiation, and subtle awareness of hierarchy. Outside, the city's night air carried distant sounds of animals, footsteps, and occasional music from taverns or private gatherings. Dogs patrolled courtyards or followed their owners on errands, while cats prowled for scraps, unseen yet attentive to every movement. In some areas, small gatherings exchanged news, debated civic matters, or shared gossip, their voices low but lively, creating an invisible network of awareness that helped citizens navigate the complex social environment. Even in casual conversation, subtle tests of knowledge, wit, and observation shaped perception and relationships, reinforcing that life in Rome demanded constant attention to both visible and hidden dynamics. Festivals and public spectacles, though occurring less frequently than daily life, were anticipated and rehearsed in private homes, workshops, and courtyards. Citizens prepared costumes, masks, and props, often integrating skills learned from trade, craft, or improvisation. The act of preparation was itself a lesson in patience, organization, and social performance, reflecting both civic pride and personal reputation. Children participated eagerly, imitating dances, songs, and gestures observed in previous celebrations, while adults coordinated tasks, delegated responsibilities, and managed logistics, creating a subtle choreography that mirrored the complex networks of the city itself. Religion remained deeply intertwined with both work and leisure. Offerings to household gods, whispered prayers, or consultation with diviners were not solely acts of devotion but tools for navigating uncertainty, managing risk, and asserting social responsibility. Citizens interpreted signs in daily events, from the flight of birds to the patterns of firelight, integrating these readings into decision-making with an awareness that success, failure, or misfortune might hinge on attentiveness to these subtle signals. Religion, law, and social custom were entwined, forming a matrix within which everyday life unfolded, giving order, meaning, and rhythm to the city's ceaseless activity. By the late hours, as lamps flickered low and the streets quieted, citizens retired to their homes or continued nocturnal tasks, their minds and bodies simultaneously exhausted and attentive. The city, though asleep in its public spaces, remained alive in countless invisible ways, a testament to human perseverance, ingenuity, and adaptability. Every vessel shaped, every loaf baked, every story told, every trade completed, and every ritual observed contributed to the complex, interwoven life of Rome, creating a continuity that stretched across families, neighborhoods, and generations, linking each individual to a greater, enduring pattern. As the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon with soft pink and gold, Rome began its gradual awakening once more, streets stirring with the creak of carts, the chatter of early merchants, and the distant calls of laborers already setting out for workshops and fields. Even in these early hours, the city was layered with activity invisible to a casual observer. Craftsmen arranged tools and materials, apprentices swept floors and prepared fire for the forge, and bakers measured flour and water for the day's bread, testing textures with practiced fingers before kneading dough with rhythmic certainty. The city's pulse quickened, yet the quiet intimacy of each task, rolling dough, shaping clay, sharpening blades, reminded all who watched that mastery lay in repeated attention, subtle adjustment, and awareness of both material and social demands. Children emerged with cautious excitement, slipping through alleys and courtyards to chase one another, play improvised games, or imitate the trades of adults. Stones became tokens for competitions, sticks became swords in imaginary battles, and the echo of laughter filled the air, blending with the distant hum of commerce. Through play, children learned both the mechanics of daily life and the subtleties of social interaction. Who led, who followed, who mediated disputes, and who observed quietly from the sidelines. These lessons, though indirect, were critical preparation for adulthood, embedding an understanding of hierarchy, cooperation, and negotiation within every game. The marketplace awoke fully as merchants set up stalls, arranging fruits, vegetables, dried legumes, and fragrant herbs with meticulous care. Shouts and calls punctuated the morning air as sellers advertised wares and negotiated prices, while buyers moved with practiced attention, evaluating quality, freshness, and value. The exchange of goods was never purely transactional. It was a ritual of observation, assessment, and subtle signaling. The placement of a loaf of bread, the way a jug of oil gleamed in sunlight, the smile or gesture accompanying a price, all carried social weight, reflecting knowledge, skill, and standing within the community. In homes, kitchens became centers of careful labor and occasional artistry. Pots of legumes and grains simmered slowly over controlled fires, their aroma mingling with herbs and oils, while parents and older children coordinated the preparation of bread, cheeses, and vegetables for both daily consumption and anticipated gatherings. Cooking was a skill intertwined with social expectation. A loaf that browned evenly or a stew that balanced flavor and texture could reflect competence, attention, and care, earning quiet respect from family, neighbors, and visiting friends. Even minor errors, burnt edges, overly salty seasoning, offered subtle lessons in patience, observation, and adjustment, reinforcing the constant refinement that shaped life in Rome. Craftsmen and artisans continued their work amid the early bustle. Metalworkers struck bronze and iron with precision, producing fittings, utensils, and small ornaments, their movements both vigorous and carefully measured. Weavers threaded looms with patience, transforming strands of wool or flax into garments or decorative textiles, each choice of pattern or color reflecting taste, skill, and social signaling. Potters shaped clay into vessels and figurines, their fingers leaving delicate marks that encoded both function and identity. Even seemingly minor items carried layers of meaning, serving utility, aesthetic pleasure, and cultural continuity, connecting hands, eyes, and intent across neighborhoods and generations. As the morning sun climbed higher, the city's rhythm intensified. Laborers transported goods, maintained infrastructure, and engaged in trades that supported both survival and economy, while citizens observed, advised, and negotiated, ensuring that the web of activity remained balanced. The interaction between work, observation, and subtle social signaling formed the invisible framework of urban life, shaping decisions, relationships, and opportunity in ways that were both immediate and enduring. Every gesture, measured, observed, or repeated, was a thread in this intricate tapestry, binding individuals to community, tradition, and the city's persistent, evolving identity. By mid-morning, Rome had transformed once more into a vibrant tableau of commerce, skill, and daily routine. The interplay of sound, scent, and motion, shouts from the market, clatter of tools, aroma of cooking, laughter of children, created a sensory map of life that was both familiar and ever-changing. Citizens moved through this space with awareness, negotiating survival, reputation, and belonging with subtlety, skill, and constant attention. In this dense weave of labor, play, and ritual, life unfolded with complexity, beauty, and an enduring rhythm that shaped every inhabitant, every corner, and every moment in the city that thrived by the sweat, skill, and subtle intelligence of its people. As the sun reached its zenith, Rome shimmered with heat, movement, and the constant hum of human activity, a city alive in its multiplicity of sounds, sights, and subtle interactions. Families prepared for midday meals with practiced efficiency, chopping vegetables, stirring legumes, and checking the status of simmering pots, while children scurried to fetch water, grind grain, or tend small animals. Each gesture carried purpose and instruction, a choreography of necessity intertwined with learning. A parent demonstrating patience in kneading dough, an elder adjusting a child's hand while chopping herbs, or a younger sibling carefully arranging bread rolls on a tray. In these moments, the ordinary became an informal classroom, transmitting knowledge, skill, and social expectation across generations. The anticipation of festivals and public rituals added layers of preparation and subtle social tension to daily life. Neighborhoods buzzed with discussion of costumes, performances, and ceremonial duties, each household carefully weighing what contribution would reflect favorably on their family and status. Even children were drawn into these calculations, practicing dance steps, memorizing chants, and observing adults' methods for negotiating roles, positions, and recognition. Festivals were more than entertainment. They were arenas of social navigation, where gestures, attention, and timing could enhance or diminish reputation, influence alliances, and even determine access to resources or opportunities. Markets reflected the layered dynamics of anticipation and practical necessity. Merchants displayed goods with meticulous care, arranging fruits, herbs, ceramics, and textiles in ways that drew attention, implied abundance, or suggested status. Buyers moved among stalls with discerning eyes, assessing quality, freshness, and fairness of price, negotiating subtly with gestures, tone, or timing. These transactions were never merely functional. They were exercises in perception, trust, and influence, reinforcing social hierarchies, neighborhood alliances, and the delicate balance between competition and cooperation. Craftsmen continued their labor with an intensity that bordered on ritual. Blacksmiths struck metal with rhythmic precision, each blow shaping tools, weapons, and small decorative objects, while apprentices absorbed lessons not only in technique but also in patience, observation, and social intelligence. Weavers, potters, and other artisans worked in similar fashion, embedding knowledge, aesthetics, and social meaning into every creation. Even minor imperfections carried lessons. How to adjust pressure, timing, or angle, how to present a final product to impress neighbors or clients, and how subtle refinements could elevate ordinary labor into respected craft. Religious observances punctuated the day, linking domestic, civic, and spiritual life in ways both visible and invisible. Citizens made offerings to household gods, whispered prayers, or consulted diviners, believing that divine favor influenced fortune, health, and social standing. Public rituals, from sacrifices to processions, engaged the broader community, reinforcing cohesion, hierarchy, and civic identity. Observation, timing, and participation were essential. Failing to respect an offering or misinterpreting an omen could carry subtle social consequences, highlighting the intertwined nature of devotion, reputation, and daily decision-making. Children's play continued alongside adult labor, a constant thread weaving learning, imagination, and social practice. Games mirrored adult concerns, trading, negotiation, competition, while offering moments of freedom, humor, and creativity. Through imitation, observation, and gentle instruction, children absorbed lessons in strategy, fairness, and social hierarchy, preparing for the complex interactions of future adulthood. Even the simplest activities, a race through an alley, tossing a stone, or arranging sticks, carried layers of meaning, shaping perception, judgment, and understanding of the city's rhythms. By mid-afternoon, the interplay of labor, leisure, ritual, and observation created a rich tapestry of urban life. Citizens moved with awareness, negotiating necessity, reputation, and opportunity, while the city itself responded. Streets echoed with footsteps, markets with chatter, workshops with clanging tools, and kitchens with the aroma of cooking. Every action, gesture, and interaction contributed to a dense network of social, economic, and cultural continuity, reinforcing cohesion and identity even in the midst of apparent chaos. As the afternoon light softened and shadows stretched across Rome's uneven streets, the city prepared for another rhythm, the subtle, intricate pulse of evening. Merchants began to close stalls, carefully storing or securing wares, while laborers completed their day's work, repairing tools, tending animals, or clearing spaces for the next morning. Yet the city did not fall silent. Courtyards, alleyways, and small squares became arenas of quieter activity, where children practiced games observed by adults, neighbors exchanged news or gossip, and artisans lingered to finish intricate tasks, the flicker of lamps casting elongated shadows that danced across walls and cobblestones. Evening was a time when the city's social subtleties became most apparent. Citizens met discreetly to discuss trade arrangements, reconcile minor disputes, or negotiate favors and alliances that could influence reputation and opportunity. These interactions were guided by centuries of custom, observation, and instinct. A gesture, a tone, a subtle nod could carry as much weight as spoken words, shaping perception, trust, and influence within the dense web of urban life. Children absorbed these dynamics with keen attention, learning how to navigate hierarchy, respect, and reciprocity through careful observation and playful experimentation. Artisans took advantage of the quieter hours to refine their work. Blacksmiths hammered metal into precise shapes, transforming raw iron and bronze into tools, utensils, and decorative fittings, each strike guided by rhythm, skill, and accumulated knowledge. Potters shaped clay on spinning wheels, fingers imprinting patterns and smoothing surfaces, while weavers threaded looms with meticulous attention, producing textiles that were both functional and aesthetically meaningful. Even the smallest creations carried significance, reflecting care, expertise, and subtle social signaling, teaching young apprentices that mastery depended on patience, observation, and dedication. Food preparation continued to occupy households, blending sustenance with social and symbolic meaning. Families boiled legumes, baked bread, and prepared small dishes seasoned with herbs and oil, the aroma drifting into alleys and courtyards, mingling with smoke from fires and the faint scent of distant markets. Meals were shared with conversation and instruction, moments of bonding and subtle observation. Even modest meals reinforced social norms, etiquette, and familial roles, teaching children not only the mechanics of cooking but also timing, attention to detail, and the importance of contributing to household and community well-being. Entertainment thrived in subtle, understated ways. Courtyards echoed with laughter as children engaged in playful competitions, while neighbors gathered to share stories, sing familiar tunes, or demonstrate skills learned through daily labor. Music, often improvised on simple instruments, accompanied movement and conversation, shaping mood and reinforcing social bonds. Storytelling remained central, blending history, fable, and moral lesson, its cadences embedding cultural knowledge, practical wisdom, and social awareness in both young and adult listeners. Festivals and public celebrations were still in preparation, their anticipation shaping behavior, conversation, and the rhythm of work and play. Religion remained deeply intertwined with evening routines. Household deities were honored with small offerings, whispered prayers, or gestures of reverence, reinforcing moral guidance, social expectation, and the perception of divine oversight. Citizens interpreted omens from daily occurrences, applying lessons learned from subtle signs in nature, commerce, and interaction to their decisions. Even in casual, domestic activities, belief and ritual were inseparable from work, leisure, and social conduct, shaping the city's invisible moral and practical framework. By nightfall, Rome settled into a layered calm. Lamps flickered in windows and courtyards, fires cast warm light onto cobblestones, and the distant hum of the city's late activity mingled with the softer sounds of domestic life. Citizens retired to quiet tasks, brief social visits, or private reflection, aware that even in rest, the rhythm of observation, preparation, and participation persisted. Every action, whether tending a tool, arranging a meal, or sharing a story, contributed to a vast, interconnected pattern of labor, culture, and survival that defined urban life. In these hours, the ordinary and extraordinary merged seamlessly. Every crafted object, every conversation, every meal, every game, and every ritual carried significance, binding citizens to community, tradition, and the city itself. Life in Rome, dense, intricate, and constant, revealed not only the challenges of survival but also the subtle beauty of skill, observation, and social intelligence, creating a rhythm that connected generations, neighborhoods, and the very heartbeat of a civilization that persisted through centuries. As the city plunged deeper into night, the soft glow of lamps and hearths outlined the silhouettes of citizens engaged in tasks both necessary and leisurely, revealing a dimension of Rome rarely visible during the day. In narrow workshops, artisans continued their meticulous labor, their hands shaping metal, clay, and fabric with precision honed through years of repetition and observation. The blacksmith's hammer rang in measured rhythm, shaping small iron tools or fittings for household use, while apprentices carefully monitored each strike, learning not only technique but also timing, attention, and the subtle social weight of presenting work that would reflect competence and reliability. Nearby, potters spun wheels, fingers smoothing surfaces and imprinting decorative patterns, understanding that each vessel, however humble, contributed to both utility and reputation within the neighborhood. Markets, though largely empty, remained sites of quiet preparation. Merchants reviewed accounts, counted coins, and organized goods for the next day's trade, their actions both practical and symbolic, reflecting status, diligence, and foresight. Even small interactions, such as checking the condition of bread or arranging herbs with aesthetic care, were exercises in social signaling, reinforcing trust, skill, and competence. In this nocturnal rhythm, observation was as essential as labor. Understanding the city's pulse, predicting neighborly needs, and anticipating the reactions of both buyers and peers were vital to sustaining livelihood and reputation. Families engaged in evening routines that blended sustenance, instruction, and subtle social shaping. Parents taught children the mechanics of meal preparation, emphasizing precision, timing, and taste, while also embedding lessons in responsibility, observation, and cooperative effort. Even minor gestures, such as placing a loaf of bread evenly or stirring a pot with care, were imbued with social and educational significance. Conversation during these moments was layered. Humor, instruction, moral guidance, and observation interwove, shaping comprehension, character, and awareness of the broader community. Entertainment persisted in quiet, intimate forms. Courtyards and alleys echoed with the laughter of children engaged in playful competitions, imitating adult trades, games, and performances. Neighbors gathered discreetly to share news, tell stories, or demonstrate simple skills, blending amusement with instruction and social calibration. Storytelling, often improvised, wove together history, morality, and civic observation, embedding lessons about strategy, trust, and hierarchy into narratives that both entertained and instructed. Music, performed on flutes, lyres, or small percussion instruments, accompanied movement and conversation, enhancing atmosphere and reinforcing subtle bonds across households and generations. Religious observances continued in parallel, seamlessly integrating into daily and nocturnal life. Household gods received offerings, whispered prayers, and attention, ensuring favor, protection, and guidance. Citizens interpreted subtle signs in routine occurrences, how firelight flickered, how a dog reacted, how wind moved through an alley, integrating these omens into decision-making, reflecting the inseparable nature of belief, survival, and social awareness. Participation in these rituals, no matter how quiet, reinforced moral order, personal responsibility, and connection to a civic and spiritual framework that structured both public and private behavior. As night deepened further, the city's rhythm shifted into layers of quiet preparation, subtle observation, and reflective pause. Citizens finished tasks that had been deferred, repaired tools for the coming day, or tidied workshops and courtyards, understanding that attention to detail and order could influence both social perception and practical outcomes. Children, having exhausted their energy in play or observation, fell into slumber, carrying the lessons of the day into dreams, while adults reflected on accomplishments, alliances, and the continuous demands of life in a city both complex and enduring. Even in the hush of midnight, Rome's vitality persisted. The flicker of distant lamps, the faint sound of a dog, the subtle clink of tools, or the whispered conversation of neighbors all testified to the city's unceasing pulse. Every gesture, every object, every interaction, however small, contributed to an intricate web of labor, observation, and social cohesion that defined ordinary existence. Life in Rome was both a practical endeavor and a subtle art. Survival, skill, observation, and relationship intertwined to create a rhythm that was at once enduring, invisible, and profoundly human. As the first pale light of dawn began to seep into Rome's alleys and courtyards, the city revealed a quiet layer of activity that many would overlook. Artisans and laborers already stirring, preparing for another day of intricate work, observation, and social navigation. Blacksmiths tested the coals of their forges, adjusting heat to ensure the perfect temper for tools, small fittings, and domestic implements. The rhythmic sound of hammer on metal echoed softly against the walls, a measured song of skill, endurance, and attention, while apprentices watched intently, absorbing not only technique but also the subtle lessons of timing, presentation, and reputation. Potters and weavers similarly prepared for the day, spinning wheels and threading looms with focused precision. Each vessel shaped, each textile woven, carried layers of meaning beyond utility. Skill, diligence, taste, and social signaling all intertwined in objects that would pass through homes, workshops, and markets. Even the most mundane items, simple bowls, jugs, or cloth, were a reflection of the artisan's attention, patience, and understanding of social expectation, teaching that survival and respect were as much about perception and care as about raw function. Markets began to stir with cautious energy, long before the public bustle would arrive. Merchants checked wares, inspected quality, and rehearsed presentations, understanding that appearance, placement, and subtle gestures could attract attention, communicate competence, and influence the perception of neighbors, buyers, and rivals. Early transactions, small but deliberate, established rhythm, trust, and hierarchy, shaping the day's unfolding commerce. Each interaction carried unspoken rules: negotiation of price, assessment of quality, and evaluation of reliability, embedding lessons in observation, patience, and subtle calculation. Families moved quietly through their domestic routines, preparing food, gathering water, and arranging household spaces for efficiency and comfort. Cooking involved more than nourishment. It was an exercise in timing, measurement, and social instruction. Parents guided children in kneading dough, boiling legumes, or chopping herbs, imparting both practical skill and subtle lessons in patience, coordination, and observation. Even minor missteps, a loaf unevenly shaped, a dish slightly overcooked, were opportunities to adjust, improve, and learn, reflecting the continuous interplay of labor, skill, and social expectation that defined life in the city. In courtyards and alleys, the softer side of life unfolded. Children played quietly, imitating adult trades, games, or ceremonies, their laughter and movements weaving a subtle layer of social education. Neighbors whispered updates, exchanged observations, or offered small favors, a network of interaction that maintained cohesion, trust, and awareness across the neighborhood. These small, hidden exchanges shaped reputation, alliances, and opportunity, demonstrating that even the quietest moments carried social and practical significance. Religion threaded through this pre-dawn rhythm as well. Household gods received offerings, prayers were whispered, and signs from augurs or subtle omens were noted and interpreted. Even the faintest detail, how smoke rose from a hearth, the reaction of a dog, or the alignment of birds in flight, was observed, considered, and applied to decisions for the coming day. These practices reinforced moral guidance, social cohesion, and personal responsibility, merging the spiritual, practical, and relational dimensions of life into a seamless whole. As the city's energy intensified with the rising sun, The interplay of craft, commerce, domestic life, and observation created a dense, living tapestry. Every gesture, hammering, weaving, kneading, arranging, or observing, contributed to a continuum of learning, skill, and social integration. Life in Rome was a perpetual cycle of preparation, execution, reflection, and subtle navigation, a rhythm that shaped not only the survival of individuals and families, but also the enduring cohesion of neighborhoods and the broader civic fabric. Even in these quiet, pre-dawn hours, the ordinary actions of citizens revealed extraordinary layers of complexity, resilience, and intelligence. Every object crafted, every meal prepared, every interaction observed, and every subtle choice in conduct was a thread in the intricate web of Roman life, connecting the practical, social, and spiritual dimensions of existence in a rhythm that was both invisible and essential, ordinary yet profoundly human. As the morning sun fully illuminated the city, Rome transformed into a dynamic stage of layered activity, blending labor, play, and subtle social maneuvering in ways both visible and hidden. Streets and courtyards thrummed with motion. Children chased one another, testing agility and imagination, while adults moved with purpose, attending to tasks that ranged from mundane maintenance to intricate craftsmanship. The rhythm of life was continuous, each gesture and interaction woven into a dense network of social expectation, practical necessity, and cultural continuity. Workshops hummed with precise energy. Blacksmiths shaped metal into tools, household implements, and decorative fittings, striking with controlled force to produce objects that balanced utility and aesthetic sensibility. Apprentices, observing each movement, absorbed lessons in both technical mastery and social perception, understanding that skill alone was insufficient without careful attention to timing, presentation, and the subtle implications of each creation. Nearby, potters shaped clay into vessels and figurines, imprinting textures and designs that signaled both function and social awareness, while weavers threaded looms with care, producing textiles that communicated taste, diligence, and standing within the neighborhood. Markets blossomed with color, scent, and sound. Merchants arranged fruits, vegetables, herbs, and wares with deliberate care, understanding that visual appeal and subtle gestures influence perception, trust, and opportunity. Buyers, moving with practiced attention, assessed freshness, quality, and fairness of exchange, negotiating not only for goods but for reputation, alliances, and advantage. Each transaction was a layered ritual, teaching participants about human behavior, observation, and the complex interplay of skill, persuasion, and social intelligence that governed civic life. Families maintained a steady rhythm of domestic engagement. Kitchens were centers of both sustenance and education. Legumes simmered, bread rose in the oven, and herbs were chopped with measured attention. Parents guided children through these tasks, demonstrating coordination, timing, and care, embedding lessons in responsibility, observation, and subtle social expectation. Even minor errors, a loaf slightly misshapen, a dish overcooked, offered instruction in patience, adjustment, and learning from experience, reinforcing the continuous interplay of labor, skill, and familial obligation. Entertainment interwove seamlessly with daily life. Courtyards and alleyways became stages for impromptu performances, playful competitions, and storytelling. Children mimicked trades, ceremonies, and social interactions, while adults offered guidance or subtle critique, blending amusement with instruction. Music, improvised or practiced, accompanied these activities, providing rhythm, atmosphere, and a channel for social cohesion. Stories circulated, blending myth, history, and moral guidance, embedding lessons about trust, strategy, hierarchy, and civic understanding in both young and adult minds. Religious practice remained interlaced with every aspect of life. Household gods received offerings, prayers were whispered, and subtle omens were observed and interpreted. Even the smallest details, the flicker of firelight, the behavior of animals, the alignment of clouds or birds, were noted and applied to practical decision-making. These rituals reinforced moral order, social cohesion, and personal responsibility, creating an invisible framework that guided both private and public behavior in ways that were simultaneously practical, symbolic, and profoundly human. By afternoon, the city's complex interplay of labor, play, craft, observation, and ritual had created a dense, living tableau. Every crafted object, every conversation, every gesture, and every observation contributed to the ongoing rhythm of life, linking individuals, families, and neighborhoods into a cohesive civic fabric. Survival, skill, and reputation were inseparable, and even ordinary tasks, baking, weaving, hammering, or negotiating, carried layers of meaning and social consequence. Rome, in its relentless complexity, revealed the extraordinary embedded in the ordinary. Each day, each meal, each game, each crafted object, and each subtle observation reinforced connection, continuity, and human ingenuity, creating a rhythm that sustained life across generations. The city itself, alive with sound, motion, and subtle interaction, became both teacher and stage, guiding its citizens through a world in which labor, skill, observation, and social intelligence were inseparable, enduring, and essential. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, Rome's streets and courtyards took on a warmer, softer glow, casting long shadows across the cobblestones and terracotta rooftops. Citizens adjusted their pace, aware of both the approaching evening and the tasks yet unfinished, their movements precise yet fluid, a choreography learned over years of observation, repetition, and adaptation. Artisans lingered over their craft, shaping metal, clay, and fabric with meticulous care, each creation reflecting both skill and subtle social signaling. The blacksmith's hammer rang with measured rhythm, each strike a demonstration of control, strength, and understanding, while apprentices absorbed lessons not only in technique, but in the nuanced communication of competence and reliability to neighbors, patrons, and peers. Potters worked with the same intensity, spinning wheels and shaping vessels whose lines and textures carried meaning beyond function. Even the smallest figurines or domestic bowls reflected aesthetic choices, attention to detail, and a tacit understanding of what neighbors, family, and buyers would perceive as skillful, tasteful, or valuable. Weavers threaded looms with patience, producing textiles that were both practical and symbolic, subtly conveying social standing, diligence, and care. These objects, though commonplace, were deeply embedded in the social and economic fabric of the city, serving as both utility and communication in a world where perception was as critical as skill. Markets buzzed with the anticipation of evening trade and preparation for festivities. Merchants displayed goods with calculated care. Fruits glimmered in sunlight, vegetables arranged by size and color, herbs emitted fragrant aromas that drifted through the streets. Buyers moved with deliberate attention, evaluating quality, freshness, and value while negotiating prices with subtle gestures and strategic pauses. Even minor exchanges carried lessons in observation, patience, and influence, reinforcing the intricate social web that governed urban life. Families prepared for communal and domestic celebrations. Kitchens and courtyards became hubs of fragrant activity. Bread baked in ovens, legumes and grains simmered over controlled fires, herbs were chopped with precision, and small treats were prepared for children and visitors. These acts combined nourishment with instruction, embedding lessons in timing, measurement, coordination, and etiquette. Even the smallest tasks, such as arranging plates or stirring a pot, were imbued with social and educational significance, reflecting the inseparability of survival, skill, and reputation. Entertainment flourished quietly alongside labor. Courtyards hosted games where children mimicked adult trades and ceremonies, while adults engaged in storytelling, singing, and demonstrations of skill. Music, whether improvised on flutes or lyres, accompanied these activities, providing rhythm, mood, and subtle reinforcement of social cohesion. Stories interwove history, legend, and moral guidance, teaching strategy, negotiation, hierarchy, and trust. These narratives, passed orally and observed attentively, connected generations and created continuity in both knowledge and social expectation. Religious observances threaded through every activity, integrating domestic, civic, and personal life. Household gods were honored with offerings, prayers whispered with care, and omens interpreted in small, everyday occurrences. How a candle flickered, how a dog reacted, or how smoke rose from a hearth carried significance, informing decisions and behavior. These rituals reinforced moral order, civic cohesion, and personal responsibility, ensuring that even ordinary actions were aligned with both divine favor and social expectation. As evening approached, the city's rhythm shifted to accommodate leisure, observation, and preparation for the night. Citizens engaged in quiet discussions, exchanged news or subtle favors, and completed unfinished work, understanding that careful attention to detail influenced reputation, opportunity, and survival. Children played with imaginative intensity, absorbing social lessons while testing physical and mental agility. The intertwining of labor, leisure, ritual, and observation created a continuous rhythm, a pulse that defined Rome as a city of both ordinary survival and extraordinary complexity. Even in these hours, the ordinary carried profound significance. Every loaf baked, every vessel shaped, every story told, and every subtle gesture contributed to a web of skill, observation, and social intelligence that bound citizens to community, tradition, and the enduring rhythm of the city. Life in Rome, relentless, layered, and interconnected, revealed that mastery, survival, and reputation were inseparable, and that beauty, skill, and subtlety flourished even in the simplest acts of daily existence. As twilight deepened over Rome, the city transformed once more, its streets and courtyards bathed in the warm glow of lanterns and hearths. The fading sun cast long shadows that stretched across walls, cobblestones, and rooftops, giving even the most familiar spaces an air of mystery and subtle intrigue. Citizens moved with deliberate attention, aware that the evening hours offered opportunities both for necessary work and for subtle social maneuvering, moments where observation, discretion, and skill could shape reputation and influence long after the day's labor had ended. Artisans lingered in workshops, their hands shaping clay, metal, and fabric with precision and care. Blacksmiths continued hammering small tools and household fittings, each strike deliberate, guided by rhythm, experience, and an understanding that every object reflected both competence and social perception. Apprentices watched intently, learning not only the physical technique, but also the subtle art of timing, presentation, and the invisible messages embedded in crafted objects. Potters spun wheels, molding clay into vessels and figurines whose shapes and patterns communicated taste, skill, and social standing. Weavers threaded looms with patience, producing textiles that were both functional and symbolic, their color, pattern, and finish observed and evaluated by neighbors, buyers, and family alike. Markets, though quieter, remained alive with preparation for evening trade and upcoming festivals. Merchants carefully arranged goods, their movements deliberate and attentive, ensuring that fruits, vegetables, herbs, and textiles attracted attention while signaling reliability, taste, and skill. Buyers moved with discerning eyes, evaluating quality, freshness, and value while negotiating with subtle gestures and quiet strategy. Even seemingly simple transactions carried layers of social meaning, teaching observation, patience, and influence, reinforcing the intricate web of urban life where every interaction mattered. Families embraced evening routines that combined sustenance, education, and social shaping. Kitchens and courtyards smelled of bread baking, legumes simmering, and herbs being chopped with care, as parents guided children through tasks that required coordination, timing, and attention. Every action, from kneading dough to arranging plates, served both practical and instructional purposes, embedding lessons in patience, observation, and cooperation. Even minor errors, such as uneven loaves or slightly overcooked dishes, were moments of reflection and adjustment, illustrating the continuous interplay of labor, skill, and social expectation. Entertainment emerged subtly, woven into daily rhythms. Courtyards and alleyways became stages for children's games, often mirroring adult trades, social ceremonies, and neighborhood interactions. Adults participated through storytelling, music, or demonstrations of skill, blending amusement with instruction. Flutes, lyres, and small percussion instruments accompanied these activities, providing rhythm and atmosphere while reinforcing social cohesion. Tales intertwined legend, history, and moral guidance, transmitting lessons in strategy, hierarchy, trust, and observation to both young and older listeners. Religious observances persisted, quietly guiding behavior and thought. Household gods were honored with offerings, prayers, and gestures of reverence, while omens and subtle signs were noted carefully. How smoke moved from a hearth, how animals reacted, or the alignment of stars and birds could all carry meaning. These practices reinforced moral order, civic cohesion, and personal responsibility, ensuring that even ordinary actions were imbued with significance and aligned with both divine favor and communal expectation. As night settled fully, Rome's rhythm continued with subtlety and nuance. Citizens completed late tasks, tended fires, shared quiet conversation, or engaged in small acts of preparation for the following day. Children slept or whispered stories in the dark, carrying lessons of observation, skill, and social awareness into dreams. The interplay of labor, leisure, ritual, and reflection created a continuous pulse, invisible yet essential, that connected every household, artisan, and alleyway into a coherent urban tapestry. Even in the deepest hours, the city remained alive with meaning. Every crafted object, meal prepared, story told, and gesture executed contributed to the dense network of survival, skill, social intelligence, and cultural continuity that defined Roman life. The ordinary became extraordinary through attention, care, and observation, revealing that mastery, social cohesion, and human ingenuity were inseparable from the simplest acts of daily existence, and that Rome thrived because every citizen, knowingly or not, was part of its enduring rhythm. The first light of dawn crept over Rome, brushing the rooftops with a pale gold that made even familiar streets feel unfamiliar, alive with anticipation. Lucia, a young girl with braided hair, tiptoed past her sleeping brother, careful not to wake him as she carried a small basket of herbs from the courtyard garden. Her father, already at the forge, struck hammer against iron with a steady rhythm, each clang echoing through the narrow alley, announcing the start of another day. The sound mingled with the distant bleating of goats and the occasional bark of a dog, creating a layered morning chorus that Rome had known for centuries. Lucia paused to watch her father, memorizing the way his arms moved, how his foot shifted to maintain balance, how the metal glimmered with each strike. She imagined herself one day working beside him, hammer in hand, shaping tools that would travel across the city or decorate a neighbor's home. Meanwhile, the baker down the street pushed open the door to his small shop, the scent of fresh bread drifting into the cool air, drawing children from alleys and courtyards. They crowded around, pressing noses against the wooden shutters, trading small coins or favors for a taste of warmth and sweetness before school, or in many cases, before chores called them elsewhere. In the market square, merchants were already arranging their stalls, but a subtle tension lingered. Some whispered about a shipment of rare olives that had just arrived, while others debated who would secure the best spot near the fountain, where passers-by were most likely to notice glistening fruits and fragrant herbs. Amid the bustle, a young boy named Marcus raced through the stalls, laughing, scattering straw, and narrowly avoiding baskets of figs. A merchant swore under his breath, but the laughter of children, so familiar, softened the moment, reminding the adults that life continue. Across the street, women carried clay jugs from the fountain, their movements synchronized, graceful, almost ritualistic, as they passed one another, exchanged gossip, and observed the behavior of neighbors. Inside one courtyard, a group of children practiced a song for the upcoming festival, their voices clashing and harmonizing as an older boy clapped a rhythm on a wooden table. Parents watched from open windows, smiling, correcting a lyric here or a note there, all while tending breakfast fires or mending garments. The air was thick with smoke, scent, and sound, a living, breathing collage of daily life that seemed chaotic to an outsider but precise to those who had grown within its rhythm. By mid-morning, a procession of men and women carrying offerings moved quietly down one of the main streets. They passed the forge, the bakery, and the market, each citizen pausing, crossing themselves, or murmuring a prayer. Marcus darted alongside them, peeking into the baskets of fruit and bread, fascinated by the intricate arrangements. He had learned that even simple gestures, folding a leaf, tying a ribbon, placing a coin, carried meaning and influence, and he mimicked. Lucia, meanwhile, returned from the garden, her basket heavier now with flowers and fresh herbs, to find her mother kneading dough for bread. The scent mixed with the lingering aroma of roasting olives from a nearby stall, and for a moment, the city seemed to hold its breath, a suspended moment of balance between labor and anticipation. A neighbor called out from across the street, inviting Lucia to join a game that imitated a harvest festival dance, and she hesitated, torn between helping her mother and running to join the others. The mother's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, giving permission without words, and Lucia ran, laughing, as her father's hammer continued its rhythmic announcement of the day. Even as the morning passed, the city never truly paused. Conversations wove through the market, laughter and song echoed through courtyards. The forge sang with metal, and the scents of food and herbs mingled in the warm air. Every person was engaged, yet none acted alone. Their lives intertwined, small gestures building networks of influence, observation, and learning that stretched across streets, alleys, and generations. Rome, in these moments, was not merely a city of stone and clay, but a living organism, its heartbeat measured in hammer strikes, children's laughter, whispered prayers, and the careful hands that shaped every object, meal, and performance.